Everything is made up of atoms, and everything also has a mass, unless it's a vacuum. But this atom is essentially an empty space. To understand the law of attraction and to learn it to an extent that we can put it into practice, it's essential that we dig it a little deeper in terms of the basics are concerned. Today we are going to discuss two different things. The first thing is, what are we made up of? What really means our physical body? The second thing is about genes, especially the concept of epigenetics, or rather, how our genes are controlled and expressed. The reason why we need to look into these two aspects mainly is these are the foundations of law of attraction. We can use law of attraction in a successful manner if we have a great deal of understanding about these two primary aspects. Now, this is the second video of the law of attraction series. If you haven't watched the first one, the link is there on top or even in the description. Just go and have a quick look and come back to this video. And before we go into detail and to the lesson, it's time for the show reel.
Let's go. Yo, I'm like an addict, ooh, I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta...
Welcome back, and this is Santhosh Rupert with the Law of Attraction series. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, it's time for you to do so. So then only you will get the constant updates about my videos. Also, I would like to hear from you, so feel free to comment, give your feedback, and also don't forget to share these videos with your friends because they are as useful as they are to you. Likewise, they are also useful for your friends, your well-wishers, and whomever it may be. Let's go into the lesson. We all are made up of physical body or a bodily mass. Now, if we divide ourselves into different systems such as respiratory system or whatever, essentially we are made up of different systems. Now, these systems are in turn again made up of different organs, and organs are again made up of tissues. These tissues in turn are made up of cells. Cells consist of nucleus and subcellular organelles. These organelles are again made up of molecules, and molecules are made up of atoms. So essentially, we are part of, or we are being built with atoms. These atoms are what step by step get built up into a multisystemic organism. Now, what these atoms are? These atoms are again have subatomic particles. Now, in general, we might have heard about things like electrons, protons, neutrons. Yes, these are the subatomic particles. But what are their properties? Quarks are a prominent set of subatomic particles. Now, these quarks are only 2% of the mass of an atom. And it is important to know that they are, in reality, vibrate within an atom at a very high velocity, which is closer to the speed of light. This brings about a huge amount of kinetic energy within an atom, which can be utilized both positively as well as negatively. Also, the quarks within an atom vibrate at a very high velocity, so that to keep them within that very smaller space also requires a lot of energy, a lot of potential. So this in turn creates a lot of potential energy within the atom. Quarks are essentially made up of 2% of mass and 98% of potential and kinetic energy. We have all heard about Albert Einstein, one of the greatest in the field of physics, and also his theories related to relativity. Now, without going in deep into those, because to understand those we might require a greater deal of physics, so let's brush it up on things that are only required for us to basically understand what law of attraction is. So essentially, his equation E equals mc square claims that energy and mass are interconvertible. You can convert energy into mass simultaneously, or vice versa. You can also convert mass into energy. Thus, the 2% of quarks are essentially mass, so the other 98% are nothing but energy sources, which collectively proves that our bodies are nothing but, to a great extent, energy sources. Though on the outset we look as a huge physical structure full of mass, but if we break ourselves down into the subatomic levels, we are essentially energy bodies. So the law of attraction is all about manipulating these energy levels. When we manipulate ourselves as a whole, we are in turn manipulating ourselves at the subatomic levels. So by such manipulation, be it a positive means of manipulation or a negative means of manipulation, we can direct our whole system, our own physical body, to do what we realistically want to. Now the second thing for today is epigenetics. Now we all have heard about genes. Now what are these genes? Genes are practically fragments of DNA. Now we all have heard about DNA. In terms of human DNA, we have 46 sets of DNA in our human cells in the form of 46 different chromosomes, or we call it as 23 pairs of chromosomes. We also have some kind of smaller fragments of DNA in our mitochondria. Now, though we inherit these genes from our parents, one set from our mothers and one set from our fathers, how they are expressed in our life also depend on the environmental factors. The gene expression essentially is a combination of the genotype, that is the gene as it is, as well as the environmental influence. Now, as we looked in the very first lecture, there are an array of studies done on twins which proves that the environmental factors play a great deal in terms of gene expression. Now, the genes, which are essentially DNAs, need to be transcribed into another nucleic acid called RNA. These RNAs again need to translate into proteins. Now, these proteins are essentially what influence in our physiology. So, in order to control the production of these proteins, in what quantity they are producing, when they are producing, this gene expression is controlled by an array of factors. Now, one such important factor is the neurotransmitter. Again, we have had a brush up on these neurotransmitters in the very first lecture. These neurotransmitters play a very crucial role in how our genes are expressed. So these neurotransmitters are again controlled to a great extent by our emotions. So by way of controlling our mind, by way of controlling our emotions, we also have a greater grasp in controlling our physiology. Essentially, our thoughts, our state of mind, our emotions, when they are stabilized and sustained for a longer period of time, they can to a great extent influence how our genes are expressed. By doing so, we can in turn control how our body behaves. We can control our physiology. So these are the two main aspects that we have looked today. The first thing is how we are made up of, and the second thing is how we are essentially controlled. So when we understand these two things in terms of the perspectives of law of attraction, it has become a bit easier for us to understand the concept as well as later on when we can put it into practice. Now, one good example how our physiology is controlled by our emotions is, now if you look into a lot of chronic diseases such as diabetes mellitus or any means of tumors, etc., 90% of them are not inherited. Those are things that we acquire during our lifespan. So what is the basis of this acquisition, especially if we don't inherit them in our genes? Obviously, they have to do something with the environmental factor. Now, if we critically analyze those lifestyles or their way of living of those families or of those areas who have critically undergone such chronic diseases, now one main thing that can come onto light is their state of mind, the negativity that is present in their state of mind. Now, one good thing about this is, though the negative mindset can influence the gene expression in a negative manner, that is not permanent. We always have the opportunity, the chance to turn it around to turn it into a positive form of energy so that our genes can get positively influenced and expressed positively. We all hold energy in the form of our thoughts, our memories, in what we think, our mindset, etc. Now these are nothing but electromagnetic vibrations. Hence, even in respect to our body, the energy that we process in our system requires a lot of attention, because negative energy can influence our body in a negative manner, and similarly positive energy can influence ourselves in a very positive manner. If we are consumed by anger, hatred, lust, jealousy, etc. to a great extent over a long period of time, what happens is it serves us in a negative manner. Similarly, if we can hold up ourselves and sustain a greater bit of peacefulness, calmness, love, joy, etc., that will serve us in a very positive manner. Being stuck internally can lead us to a lot of ailments, chronic diseases, whereas when such thoughts are stuck externally, external to our system, that impacts our relationships, our careers, our wealth, our finances, etc. The best way to deal with such circumstances is to transform that negative energy into positive energy and to attract positive things from the negative things that we have always attracted on. When one transforms the negative energy into positive energy, anger becomes peace, resentment becomes good, greed becomes contentment, lust becomes detachment, entanglement becomes involvement, hate becomes acceptance at first, and then love, and so on. The life as a whole gets transformed. So now the question is, how do we transform this negative energy into positive energy? We have looked down into the basics. We have looked on what our physical body is and how it is controlled. So now it's time for us to learn how do we transform this negative energy into positive energy so that we can control our being both internally as well as externally. To do that, catch me on the next session. Cheers.